From Mencari Newsroom at redmencari.com.
Good morning. On today's rundown, May 20, Tuesday, I'm Nico Santos. Here's the top stories. Liberal leader Susan Lee and National leader David Littleproud held critical talks today to finalize a coalition agreement following their election defeat. Key sticking points include net zero emission commitment and nuclear power policy, with the Nationals have 7 spots in Peter Dutton's shadow cabinet after the NT Senator Jacinta Nampijimpa Price was promoted in 2023 to lead the fight against the Voice to Parliament. The Nationals are seeking enshrine their 20 billion regional future fund in any agreement while demanding a portfolio flexibility. Shadow cabinet position remain in flux, with Ted O'Brien widely expected to become shadow treasurer and speculation mounting over Jacinta Nampijimpi Price's future role. Assistant Treasurer Daniel Molino defended Labor continuous superannuation tax on balance above 3 million, dismissing concern about taxing unrealized gain. At its heart, this is a tax about fairness. It's a tax that makes our super system fairer and home sustainable. The tax, affecting approximately 80,000 Australians, has sparked debate over its complexity and potential behavior impact. Treasury modeling: in 30 years' time, it's expected that around 10% of taxpayers will have gone above the 3 million threshold.
Look, I think at its heart, this is a tax about fairness. It's a tax that makes our super system fairer and more sustainable. It affects a very small number of accounts, around the top 0.5% of accounts in terms of size. And it's also a tax that will provide concessional treatment. So these are accounts that are receiving concessional treatment and that will continue to receive concessional treatment, just at a slightly lower rate. When it comes to unrealised gains, what I'd note is that there are other instances where unrealised gains are dealt with in a similar way in the tax system, for example with trading stock such as Australian carbon credit units. So this is not unprecedented. And the other thing I'd say is that the advice from the Treasury is that if we hadn't gone down the path that's being suggested, it would have added a great deal of complexity and red tape to the system. So,
Opposition Shadow Finance Minister Jane Hummy criticized the policy as a tax unrealized capital gain that could force skilled workers into early retirement, potentially harming productivity.
Well, this tax has been bad from day one, and that's why we opposed it from day one, and not only said that we would oppose it, but repeal it when we got into government. And the reason why it's bad is threefold. One, it's a tax on superannuation, which a lot of people have made plans. They've already put their money into superannuation on the deal that there was a contract there that it would be taxed in a certain way. They might have made different plans for their money if they had have known that this tax was on its way. So that's and it's a broken promise. I mean, let's face it, before the election before last, the government said, Labor said there would be no new taxes and no changes to super. They immediately backflipped on that promise. The second reason, though, that this is a bad tax is it's a tax on unrealised capital gains. Now, we've never had a tax on unrealised capital gains before. That's taxing profits before you've actually made profits. The third reason it's a very bad tax is because it isn't indexed. Now, while the government says it only affects a small number of people, it's actually going to affect more and more and more every year. And Murray Watt belled the cat just yesterday when he said that this is their key revenue source. Now, that I think is quite frightening for Australians that have relied on a consistent superannuation system for many, many years. But now we're hearing too that it's going to make people not just change their behaviour, but even leave the workforce sooner. That's going to be bad news for productivity, and we know that productivity has tanked in Australia over the last few years. It's actually gone backwards by about 6%. There's no way we can have consistent economic growth unless we boost productivity.
The Productivity Commission released 15 priority reform areas today, seeking public input on addressing Australia's decade-long productivity stagnation. Essentially, we are running a pretty flat, and in fact, productivity has been flat now for the best part of the decade. That matters because productivity is ultimately what drives business capacity to pay higher wages. Commission Chair Daniele Wood outlined key areas including business investment incentives, artificial intelligence adaptation, and care economic reform.
We are running pretty flat, and in fact productivity has been flat now for the best part of a decade. That matters because productivity is ultimately what drives businesses' capacity to pay higher wages. It's what drives our overall living standards. So the Treasurer is absolutely right to make it a focus. We do need to get it up because if we want to make sure that our children have higher living standards than we did, ultimately productivity growth is going to be how we do that.
The consultation follows Australia recording its worst productivity performance in 60 years, with labour productivity grow just 1.1% annually over the past decade. Former President Joe Biden has been diagnosed with prostate cancer, his office said Sunday. The finding came after the 82-year-old reported urinary symptoms, which led to doctors to discover a nodule on his prostate. He was diagnosed with prostate cancer on Friday, with the cancer cell having spread to the bone. Biden office said his score was 9, suggesting his cancer is among the most aggressive. Medical experts indicate that when prostate cancer spread to other parts of the body, it's often spread to the bones. Metastasized cancer is much harder to treat than localized cancer because it can be hard for drugs to reach all tumor and completely root out the disease. Political leaders across the spectrum expressed support, with President Trump posting, "We wish Joe a fast and successful recovery." The Reserve Bank met yesterday ahead of today's interest rate announcement, with economists increasingly confident of a cut amidst slowing inflation and global economic uncertainty. Deloitte Access economic Pradeep Philip argued for a 25 basis point reduction, stating,
"We know the number one issue in our economy is that we must have more business investment to lift productivity. And this is in the context where we're now seeing inflation coming down steadily. And the third is that we've got these storm clouds gathering on the global economy." And you had Minister Farrell on before talking about, the importance of getting peace and trade. Well, the lack of peace and the walking back on trade are these sort of storm clouds that are gathering on the global economy. So we think the conditions are there for the Reserve Bank to cut interest rates tomorrow, because that would be a good signal for more business investment, and it kind of takes out a bit of insurance given the storm clouds on the global economy.
The decision comes as a business investment remain crucial for addressing Australia's productivity challenges, with research and development spending languish at the bottom of OECD ranking. Also in the news, TWU calls for maximum $121 million penalty against Qantas over illegal outsourcing of 1,800 ground workers. Social media influencer increasing reshape Australian political discourse, with 41% of TikTok user now getting news from influencer. That's all for today. This is Miko Santos. See you again for another episode of today's Rundown.
Subscribe to Mencari for news with authentic Gen X perspective, cutting through the noise with zero fluff. Available now across all podcast platforms. News without the noise, perspective without the panic.